Hello and welcome back to the Irish Mammy channel. If you're new here, my name's Katrina and I'm slightly addicted to growing vegetables. So I am finally getting round to planting my outdoor beds here. We have an overcast day. We're at the start of June. Definitely very late planting these outside beds, but I am sort of working that to my advantage this year. So if you've been watching my videos, you know I have a full 26 feet by 60 polytunnel, and that's currently all planted up and producing plentiful harvests already, and I expect that to go through the summer. I also have my greenhouse here at the back planted up with tomatoes, and I'm starting to harvest some early summer vegetables from there, and now I'm getting around to planting my outdoor beds. So it's been a mix of being so busy, having so many other planting projects on, and all the prep work that needed to be done to get these beds ready for planting. Just all takes time, but I'm going to work it to my advantage, like I was saying. So I'm planning on planting these now early June, and I'm thinking the earliest harvests I'll have, well, apart from salad, the earliest harvests I'll be getting will be mid-August onwards, which suits perfectly well in my timeline because I expect to be confined to the house for quite a bit of time in August, since I am 7 months pregnant, or 7.5 months pregnant at this stage. Feels like 10 months, but anyway. So because I'm expecting at that time to be mostly around the house, or now I'm not going to be tied to the house, but probably spending a lot more time around the house. So that'll suit to be harvesting from the garden at that time, just outside the back door of the house. So I finally drew up my plan because I have so many things planted in other areas. I honestly wasn't sure what I wanted to even grow outside here. So I've spent the morning going through what I'm going to plant in each bed, trying to figure out what was already planted to keep some sort of rotation going. Now I don't strictly follow rotations either, but certain things I would, or if I know I had a pest problem in particular, like I don't want to plant a similar variety in the same space. So I think I have that all worked out. I put it down on paper and already I'm chopping and changing. It's the usual story. So I'm going to go, I'll show you the plan here now. A very basic plan. I don't get too fancy. I just draw out my rectangles for my beds and write in what I'm going to plant. No drawing, no artist here. And then I'm going to get started. So you can see I have one bed planted here behind me already. I think that was the only bed that was empty or cleared out from the winter. So it was the first bed to plant any of my extras into. So I have some lettuce growing over there on the end, extra peas, they're just a dwarf pea variety. So I planted a full bed of those in the polytunnel and had some plants left over, and I just stuck them in there. I also tried to sow spinach in there. I tried to have the remainder of the bed sown in spinach, but I direct sowed it, I think it was early March, and it was just too cold, even for spinach, I think. So the spinach didn't really take. I think there's about 3 or 4 plants there which I haven't even harvested from. I then stuck in, I had coriander sown in cells, and it was starting to scream at me to get out of the trays, and I stuck it in there, but it's just proceeded to go to bolt. So I could probably pull that out, but I am kind of harvesting little bits of it for garnishes for different things. So until I get another coriander crop growing, I'm probably just going to leave them there. Even though they're bolting, there is still some flavour to the leaves and that for fresh eating. My plan for coriander this year is, like I do with most of my summer herbs, is to grow a huge big amount of it and freeze it. I know there's various ways you can preserve herbs, and of course drying would be a more common way, but I find the flavour isn't as strong, and I really do love the flavour of fresh herbs. Now their consistency is somewhat changed when you freeze them, where it's not when you dry them, so there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And I use dried herbs routinely as well in my winter cooking, but it's nice just to have that fresh taste even though it's coming from the freezer. And I would do that with basil, coriander and dill especially. Not so much parsley. I'm not finding the flavour of parsley really any better from frozen than it is from dried, so it depends on the herb, but certainly coriander, dill and basil would be my three main herbs, and of course they're the herbs that don't grow all through the winter either. Luckily rosemary, thyme and even sage grows fairly well here through the winter. Sage maybe a little bit more borderline, but you can usually harvest sage up until certainly Christmas anyway. The colder frost and snow of January and February can often take your sage but not always either. It does sometimes survive, just depending on where you situate it. So if you have it in a pot and you can move it, you can certainly overwinter it much easier. So I'll show you the plan here now, explain the changes that I've made already and show what I've gathered to start planting, and then I'm just going to get at it. We're at the 3rd of June today. I'm not sure when you'll be seeing this video, but I don't think I've ever been this late planting my outdoor garden, but like I said, I have harvests coming from other areas, so it's not like I'm completely dependent on this area now. So just to give a better idea of the before, so all the beds have been topped up with EnviroGrind. Now obviously there were still crops in here. I still had parsnips, leeks, celery up until about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think I had Swedes that were bolting. I had fennel that was regrowing from stubs where I had already harvested, left the roots in the ground, and it was resprouted. I had red cabbage that had resprouted as well, where I'd cut the head off and left the stalk, and it had started to resprout. Just several little bits and pieces like that, and weeds, of course. Any amount of weeds, never a shortage of them. So the beds have all been weeded, topped up with compost, except this one, this that's already planted, because I already had it planted. I didn't get to top it up, but it's fairly high anyway, and there was only carrots grown in it over winter. And now, I mean, what I have in it now isn't really very taxing on the soil either, and it is my salad bed for this summer as well. So don't need a huge pile of nutrition in that bed. All topped up with EnviroGrind. I have these 2 beds covered with Mypex, so these 2 beds are going to be onions. I'm reckoning I get roughly 50 onions from each bed, so that would be 100 onions, which still isn't enough for me for the year, but it's better than none. That's it. That's all there is to say. I have my plants gathered up down here. Oh, I'll show you the plan. So the plan's sitting here waiting. I just drew this out this morning. I hope you can see it there. So this is my greenhouse side here. Spinach, potatoes, my courgettes and squash, my celery, leeks, parsnips. I always tend to plant those 3 vegetables in the same bed, only because of the amount that I need. And this year as well, I will have both celery and leeks growing in my polytunnel. They're not planted yet. I'm waiting on my early peas to come out, but after that then the celery and leeks will go in, and they'll last a lot longer. So I'm hoping that'll save me from actually having to freeze any celery and leeks this year, so I can just use them straight from the polytunnel. That's the plan, at least. So this is the bed that's already planted. with salad and herbs, and I have plans to put a few different herbs in there as the summer progresses, and a few different types of leaves and greens. This is the first onion bed and the second onion bed. This is carrots. Now this is the bed where the carrots are going here. This is not topped with EnviroGrind, so I had ran out. I spent hundreds of euros on compost this year and still hadn't enough to cover this bed. So this got topped up eventually with bagged compost, and it's not organic, which irks me. Although technically the EnviroGrind I don't think it's not certified organic, certainly. But this is a mix of leftover compost and container compost, seed compost, soil with John Innes, but all bagged stuff. And I had bits and pieces of bags of compost, different types of compost lying around. So I mixed them all together and fired them in on the top of this. There's a slight danger that it's too rich for my carrots, but I'm going to take the risk because it is such fine compost. I think it will be ideal for my carrots. Obviously I didn't add any extra nutrition, so there's no pellets or fertilizer going into it whatsoever, because certainly the compost itself will have enough. And possibly because it is older compost, I'm hoping, and would have been lying outside a lot, I'm hoping that a lot of the nutrition is washed out of it so that it's not over fertile for my carrots. And I suppose there's a good 6 inches depth of that bagged compost, and then underneath is EnviroGrind as well. So that bed had strawberries in it and had sunk quite low, which is why it needed so much compost to top it up again. So the underlying soil is fairly washed out as well. So that's why I'm hoping it's the perfect bed for my carrots, but time will tell. Now I have seeds gathered here. So some of my plants are going to be direct sown seeds, or some of my vegetables. This is carrots Rodelica that I got from Brown Envelope Seeds this year. I'm keen to try these just as a different variety. I nearly always grow Nantes and Autumn Autumn King, so I thought I'd just try this for something different, see how it does in my raised beds, and maybe it's something I can grow again. I have spinach gathered up here. Now I had planned on sowing perpetual spinach. Because we're at the beginning of June, it's probably not a great idea just sowing regular spinach, because it does tend to bolt quite quickly. And we are into the heat of summer. I mean, it's hard to believe summer's actually here, but the temperatures have risen. And spinach is, especially from the beginning of June, a lot of plants seem to cycle using daylight as their catalyst, will we say, where days getting longer sends them to seed. And I know Florence fennel or bulb fennel is one of those plants. And I think spinach is another, coriander is another as well, which is why I'm not even bothering sowing coriander just yet. I will wait. The 21st of June is the longest day, and after that the days start to get minusculely shorter as the time goes on. So for those more sensitive plants, daylight sensitive plants, I'm better waiting until after the 21st of June to sow. Spinach is one of those as well. If I can find perpetual spinach, I'm going to sow it in that bed. Where am I? That bed there. I have planned for potatoes in one bed here. Now I don't normally grow potatoes in these beds. I have potatoes coming from the polytunnel as well. So I have earlies in there, and some, we'll say unexpected potatoes as well. Potatoes that I planted in about October as in the hope of getting a Christmas harvest, but of course it was too late planting them. But I presumed they just went to nothing or disintegrated in the soil, and lo and behold, come February and March they started to grow again. So I'm sowing just one particular type, the Sarpomira, in one of these raised beds because I really liked them this year. They keep really well. They're only starting to sprout now, and yet they're still fairly firm. I liked their growth habit as well. They were all mainly large potatoes, no little porrings as such as we call them here, you know, little tiny potatoes. They grew really well, a good size, and a good yield. Now that was out in the ridges, of course, last summer. So there's a cacophony of noise behind me between dogs barking, chickens clucking, laying eggs, whatever they're doing, making noise, setting the dog mad. Birds that are nesting in the eaves of the house here and under the roof tiles. Mowers, trimmers, strimmers. Constant background noise, so I hope you can hear me clearly over all that. Anyway, we'll continue with the raised bed tour. So this is just some of the plants that I've gathered here. Spring onions, leeks, some celery in there, my potatoes which are well sprouted with the undesirable sprouts, but I'm happy enough that they'll grow well when they get into the soil. Down here I have a sunflower, random sunflower that my son sowed in school, which we'll have to stick in somewhere. I have my courgette and squash bed has a courgette, sorry, can't see that. The courgette Atina polka is a yellow variety. I mean, I think in America they call these yellow squash rather than yellow courgettes. I have the yellow bush scallop squash, which is like a patty pan type, I think. It's a round squash with like a fluted edge to it. If I can put a picture up on the screen, I will do that. And then courgette black beauty, which is the green courgette, or zucchini as you also can call these variety. So just 3 plants. So anyone who's ever grown courgettes will attest to the fact that they grow like weeds, and usually the neighbours are sick of getting courgette presents on their front doorsteps. So to avoid that, even though I do like them, I don't think I could handle having too many of them, and I don't want to be that neighbour trying to pawn off all the courgettes. So to combat that, I grow them outside. They're not just quite as prolific in our climate growing outdoors. Now if I wanted a super amount of them, I would just put them up in the polytunnel. But also having them outdoors here means I can monitor them easier as well. If I had them in the polytunnel, I might not see the plants as often, and really when they do start to produce, you'd need to be checking on them every day to harvest from them, especially in heat like that. Because a day, 12 hours can even make a huge difference in the size of a courgette from being a nice size with, you know, underdeveloped seeds to being a huge big marrow basically. In the height of summer, 12 hours can make a huge difference in the harvest window. So, like I said, growing them outside is definitely a great way to combat that problem. So 3 plants, 1 of each yellow and green courgette or zucchini, and 1 bush scallop variety. Will go in 1 bed. And now I will probably interplant with some sort of salad or spring onions, or maybe dill even would probably grow well in there in that bed, because there will be still space around the edges. And I like to get as much growing in a bed as I can, even if it's only to keep the weeds down, if nothing else. And then I also have my onions. So I sow my onions from seed, and they are terribly late getting in the ground. So you can see they're getting starved of nutrition at this stage. They're even starting to develop little bulbs of their own at the base. So probably not getting a great harvest of onions this year at all. And this is the variety Onion Density 4, and I've sown them on the 17th of February. So March, April, May, 12. They're about 14 weeks sitting here in this tray. Easily 14 weeks. Definitely not ideal, but they're not going to do anything where they are. They need to get in the ground. But like I said, I'm not expecting hugely developed bulbs. Anyway, enough chit chat. Probably spent far too long talking on this already. Just need to get on with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my potatoes in. That's the handiest one to get in, and at least I'll have one bed down. And I think that I'll go on to my onions. But we'll time lapse and we'll come back after I'll come back after I have all that done. Well, it took most of the rest of the day to get that done, but we're finally done. All but one bed fully planted. The only bed I have left is one that I'm going to put flowers in. I had originally planned 2 beds for flowers, but I forgot about my strawberries. So I'm just going to run through each bed. You can kind of see the overview. Still a few bits and pieces lying around from my planting. But yeah, not a whole pile different from earlier today, but 4 to 6 weeks we'll see a huge difference in these beds. So a quick run through of each one now, and then it's time for dinner. So this is the bed left for the flowers. I figured it's kind of beside our seating area over there, so I wanted to put the flowers in this bed. And I also have a trellis on it now. The trellis is more to keep the dog in than anything else, but I might as well make use of it for flowers as well when I'm at it. So something creeping up there. I do have cosmos seeds to direct sow, and after that I'm just going to pick up probably a few snapdragons or something in the local garden centre. Maybe direct sow a few dwarf sunflowers as well. Just not entirely sure what I'm going to put in there. I had taken out snapdragon seeds and a pile of different seeds, but honestly I'd be much better at this stage in early June to pick them up in the garden centre already started. Otherwise I'll just be waiting too long for flowers, and probably the good weather will be gone. Strawberries, so I had planned on more flowers in here, kind of like a cut flower area, since I didn't plan a cut flower area out in the field this year, just to kind of cut back on the work ever so slightly. So anyway, I realised I hadn't my strawberries anywhere planned for anywhere, so they had to take over one of the flower beds, and these will stay here for 3 years. Now I only have 12 plants there, but these are already sending out runners. They're probably a bit stressed in their pots. So 12 plants planted there, and even though you shouldn't really take runners off them in their first year, like, they're already grown there, so I'm probably going to take them. You can see from some of them, and I did try to get close up when I was planting them, I tried to keep them ever so slightly above the ground. Not sure if you can see the crown of those strawberries are ever so slightly raised above the level of the soil in the bed, just to try and prevent crown rot of the strawberries over winter. Any water lying in them, freezing and thawing, can cause the crown to break up and rot as well. So trying to avoid that, but having said that, I'll probably have lots of replacements if I do lose any. Not that it's common. They generally survive quite well over winter in our climate. So this is the onions. Now you may have noticed I had to separate out my onions. I had forgot to do that job in advance, and then I just laid them out in the bed. They started to wilt pretty quickly because the sun decided to show its face. So I kind of done a method that I ended up doing with the leeks as well, which is called puddling in, except I just done it a little bit more heavily with the onions. So I was just dibbling a hole and sticking the roots down into the bottom of the hole, and it was about 2 inches deep generally, and coming along afterwards then with the hose and washing the soil down in around the roots. It just meant I got them out of the sun quicker and helped prevent them from wilting so quickly. And you may have seen I done it with my leeks as well, and it is a traditional way of planting leeks, and it's supposed to help with the leeks. Obviously I was putting them deeper, not they were certainly going 4, 5, maybe even 6 inches in some cases deep, whereas the onions were only 2 to 3 inches. I wasn't trying to bury the roots of the onions, just to get them out of the heat basically. So that worked quite well for me, just to get them out of the sun fairly quick. And 2 beds of those. That bed there covered with my pecs is a bed of onions as well. And the variety is onion density 4. I haven't grown it before. I think I couldn't find my exhibition onion seeds on time to get them sown, so that's why I sowed the density 4. This side is carrots. This is the Rodelica variety I spoke of earlier. Tried a new seeder, and I will do a video on all the different tools I use at some stage. I have used a seeder for carrot sowing in the past, a different one than I use today. That was the first time I used that one today, and I don't honestly know if I give it a great review, but it may have been user error, who knows. But the other one I have certainly works a lot easier. However, I got them sown anyway. I was able to spread them out to fill them almost the full bed. I had 2 rows on the very end left over. I ended up putting spring onions into those because, as we know, onions are a good deterrent for carrot root fly. And then I decided to just put very close to the edge there, I put 1 more row of spring onions, just to kind of have a barrier either side for the carrot root fly. And I've said before, they're not supposed to be able to get into this bed, but I have had, because it's so high, but I have had trouble with carrot root flies before. Ideally, I should be covering this with a net. I'll see if I get round to it. That's all I'm going to say on that one. Hopefully these will be harvested early enough, it'll not be as much of a problem. So this is the bed I had already planted. I don't know if I got so close up on this earlier on. So I had sown spinach, and I have about 4 plants, and honestly they're probably going to go to seed soon. I'm going to harvest them and use them up in something. And I had interplanted the coriander, which you can see has started to go to flower. Yeah, so I had spring onions I didn't get in actually, but they will go in here, as well as another sowing of coriander seeds. Just not yet. I'll have to hold off a few weeks for the coriander seeds. And this is the dwarf peas. So there are plenty of peas producing. You can see some of them there. But honestly, they kind of disappear as soon as they show any signs of fattening up at all. They're used as garden snacks, which is fine. I like to see that. And this is lettuce. That's ready for harvesting now. I have some in my greenhouse as well, but it's starting to go to seed, so I'm going to start using this now next. I do need to get more lettuce sown, and I would probably sow a short row in there among my squash and courgettes, because I'll have it harvested before the courgettes get to any decent size. So the courgette varieties, I think I did speak of earlier, Atina polka, which is yellow courgette or zucchini or yellow squash. This is the bush scallop squash, and this is Black Beauty, a green squash or zucchini or courgette. Called many different names. They are all bush varieties. When I started growing first, I was growing a vining courgette, and well, it's a bit of a problem, especially growing it outside. It just gets everywhere. So I do prefer the bush varieties, so they stay fairly compact. And like I said, 3 plants in this bed, but I can interplant with different things. So lettuce will be probably the first 1 or 2 crops interplanted. Dill is a good companion plant for squash and courgettes as well, so I will put dill in at some stage. Not yet though. I want my dill harvest to coincide with my cucumber production, even though I'm not actually preserving them, but I do like a salad with dill and cucumbers, so it'd be nice to have them together. Over this side then is my celery, leeks and parsnip. So you see, I had to separate out my celery plants. They're not very happy with me, and they're probably going to sulk for about a week, because I have already transplanted some into cellular trays or cell trays that will eventually be going to the polytunnel, and they took at least a week to recover. But the secret would be to keep them well watered. Celery likes plenty of water throughout the season. They're a bog plant or peatland plant, as far as I know. They prefer a lot marshy kind of ground, wet ground. And I have a perfect bed in the polytunnel for celery, because it gets really wet with the runoff from the hill outside. That's the plan for it. So these are the holes that I dug. You see, I used a bulb planter to get these holes nice and big. I tried several dibbers and they just weren't big enough. So the idea is that the roots are pretty much covered over down there in the holes, and you kind of earth them up in some ways, and it helps keep the shaft of the leek nice and white, because obviously that's more tender and sweet for using in cooking. Now you can of course use the bottom of the green part as well, but usually the green tops are cut off and often wasted, but they can be used in stews or something that cooks low and slow, or they can go to chickens to make eggs, which they often do in our case. Now I have 2 rows of parsnips sown here. I do plan on hopefully sowing more parsnips in the polytunnel. The first time really that I've tried a later sowing of parsnips, so we'll see how that goes. And my potatoes are here in this last bed with their scraggly stalks sticking up, so I've kind of planted them in holes. So this is what I couldn't do in the polytunnel because I was planting through my pecs. So they're just planted in holes to hopefully get them shooting up green shoots very soon. And then I'll just fill the holes in to cover them over. It's a method of earthing them up in raised beds. The jury's out on how effective it actually is, but I'll do it anyway just to keep everybody happy. And then this final bed was my spinach bed. So I, at the time earlier, couldn't find my spinach, perpetual spinach. I have found it when I went looking for my spring onion seeds. I'll show you the seed packet. So it's called spinach beet, which is a perpetual spinach. So really and truly this is beetroot that doesn't produce roots, or the roots don't swell on them. You could also say they're a type of chard. I mean, they're all related plants. They're just bred for different qualities. So chard would be quite similar, and like the seeds you'd notice are the same as well. A cluster seed with several seeds in one. And I have sown this before, and what I never thought of doing was allowing it to go to seed, because this should just keep, in theory, keep reseeding itself, like it's perpetual spinach. So leaving it here will hopefully allow it to do that, have a full bed of it, and just allow it to go to seed, regrow, go to seed, regrow, and have several life cycles. And it would be nice to be able to constantly come out and have a constant supply of spinach. Now there will be varying times where it'll get tougher, but I mean it'll just mean letting it grow on, doing without it for a wee while, letting it grow on and go to seed. But even the tougher spinach can be used in certain dishes as well. It's going to be cooked low and slow, and at the worst of times the chickens absolutely love spinach, so if necessary it can go to the chickens. And as long as it's reseeding itself and growing new plants, I can do that. And I would also like to sow some up in the polytunnel as well at some stage. If I can just set aside maybe half a bed or something for it, that would be great. Now I'll give you a quick view of the greenhouse. It's a bit of a mess. But this is the early stages of it. So I've these crops coming on from spring. Cabbage, I think I had 6 planted in here. Now they're getting ate alive by slugs, but they're still usable, and I have cooked I think 2 of them in the last week or so, and I'll hopefully get the rest of them. I'm cooking 2 at a time because it just helps to use them up quicker. So I'm hoping to get these out in the next over the next week or week and a half. I don't want to overdo the cabbage on the family either and turn them off it. This is cauliflower, the same batch that I ended up sowing or planting later in the polytunnel, and I was delighted to find today that it's starting to produce its lovely creamy curds. So I'm delighted to see that. So another probably a couple of weeks, maybe not even. I do always kind of forget how long it takes to actually produce the full size head. And I've only 6, so it's a nice manageable amount to use within a couple of weeks without overdoing cauliflower, which can sometimes happen when I have cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage all coming at once. They might get cabbage every day for a week or every other day. They don't belong getting sick of it. Then I had some Cos lettuces or Cosberg lettuce, which I really, really love. But they got green fly actually, and I really should have pulled them out. But I will pull them out. They're actually buried kind of in under the cauliflower in there now. And then I had this lettuce mix that's supposed to be cut and come again. But you can see it's starting to go into seed there now. I'll probably take one more harvest of this, even though I have my outdoor leaves ready. I'll take one more harvest of it, and then the rest will go to the chickens. The tomatoes were only planted, I think earlier in this week, actually, is when I planted them. They sat here for ages in pots. I just couldn't get to them. So they look terrible, but they are starting to show signs of recovery already. So you can see the difference there. That top shoot on that plant is so nice and green compared to the bottom leaves. And you can see the same here on this one. Nice green leaves coming on the top. So slowly but surely they are recovering. And I actually done a funny reel on my Instagram account saying that they had the man flu. Showing all the signs, if you want to check that out over on my Instagram page too. So this is the celery that I transplanted into the cell trays. So I multi-sow or sow really thickly in one small pot, and then just prick them out and add them into these cell trays. Now, I probably have far more celery than I need. But I'm hoping that I will probably use half of this to sow or to plant in the next few weeks when my peas come out. And then allow the rest to grow on. Now it'll mean minding it for most of the summer, but let it grow on and plant it in that wet bed that I spoke of in the polytunnel. And hopefully then it'll produce or grow well enough in the autumn and hold kind of in the beds without having to pick and freeze and preserve in any way. That's the plan. Still tomato plants lying in containers. Now I do have containers outside there waiting to be filled. So all these tomatoes that are here now left are all bush and dwarf varieties. So I'm going to line them up along my beds outside and see how they do. I don't have a great record of tomatoes producing outside, but I have also put some of them in a window box at the front of the house. I have another one here in a hanging basket. I have another one here in a pot. So I'm really trying them out in several different ways. Now some of them will probably go to my sister when it's safe enough to leave them out all the time. But yeah, probably going to be overrun. I'm going to end up dumping out tomatoes. That's what's going to happen. But it was inevitable with all the seeds I sowed. That was what was going to happen. And over here, amid all the chaos, I have some Thai basil plants up there. I have basil here, just regular basil, Genovese basil. It's coming on lovely. I have moved some of these up to the polytunnel. I plan to plant some up there, some in amongst the tomatoes here, and probably some in a window box as well. I have had great success growing basil in a window box. And again, it's grown it for maximum production for freezing and using over the winter. And I find it's a handy way as well of having it for my tomato preserving recipes as well. I'm still in my propagator here now. This propagator is not on. It's just being used for storage at the minute. So there's no lights, no heat, no nothing on it. So I have still more celery plants coming on. That's a different variety of celery. If you can see that in there, that's tall Utah. I have more leeks, so that's the leeks I was taking from today, and then I have 2 more varieties which are going into the polytunnel. I'd probably pop them on in cell trays, to be honest, because they're not going to do much there. They're going to stay quite thin, and I'd probably give them a haircut as well. It'll help toughen them up. Then I have a few failed germination attempts there. I think that was sage, so there's one tiny little sage plant there. Melons that didn't germinate, cucumbers that still have to go in here in the greenhouse. Oh, my what is it? Basil, Napolitano Belloso, lettuce leaf basil. Basically, it grows huge big leaves. So that's just in a cell tray, and the leaves are huge already. And when it gets planted out, the leaves actually get even bigger than the palm of your hand. And I have some thyme growing in there, in at the back, and some chives that sparsely germinated for me as well. So that's the quick tour of the raised beds and greenhouse. I suppose more so to see the after. This is kind of the before. And again, like, this is the late planting as well compared to my polytunnel, but it'll all catch up eventually. And it'll leave me with staggered harvests, which is better as well. So if you've made it through this far, thanks very much for watching. And I will see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Bye bye.